So guys, State of Decay 3 is literally going to be unlike any post-apocalyptic survival game we have ever seen. Now there is some in the genre that rely heavily on sandbox elements like DayZ or 7 Days to Die, or some that really focus on story like The Last of Us, but there will be nothing like State of Decay 3 where it's going to combine all of that into one, and despite only 2 trailers and 1 official article, there is a ton of information about this game that you're not aware of. Multiplayer is going to be insanely cool, more on that later. Story elements based on your communities will be enhanced to another level. Gameplay will be modernized even on just the little that we saw, and State of Decay 3 also has a release window that, according to a really good source, isn't as far away as a lot of people think. Now if you guys don't know me, my name is Sunny here at Sunny Games, and with that, let's dive into what I feel is one of the biggest aspects about State of Decay 3 that gets me really excited, and that is the new looming threat that we are all about to face. If you're new to this franchise, this has generally been considered a post-apocalyptic zombie game, but there's always been these different freaks, or in other words, different types of monsters called bloaters, screamers, juggernauts, and my least favorite and responsible for almost all my character deaths, and that's ferals. And over time, from State of Decay 1 and 2, these have evolved to become much more dangerous. In State of Decay 2, the higher the difficulty, you'll see even plague variants of all of these, and the plague feral is the worst of all because he's harder to kill and he's insanely fast. Well, we saw in the latest trailer these dudes have evolved even more because time has passed since the last game. Now in one shot we see a screamer who is typically the least worrying of all the freaks currently in State of Decay 2, as he simply just calls on more zombies to his side to kill us, but now he is shooting out what looks like maybe lava, as he has what is called molten lungs. That is not something we've had to worry about before in the past. And then further towards the end of the trailer, we see what looks like an even more fierce juggernaut. Also guys, the bridge is now filled with plague. Now you see some of that in State of Decay 2's Heartland with the plague walls, but in other parts of the trailer, like when this lady is climbing the van, you see how it just looks much more spread out and a lot more worse. Now another thing people might not have noticed, and I didn't actually right away, and the whole point of me talking about this is because the zombies in the trailer are all walking very slowly. At the start of the trailer, you see how the very beginning zombie here looks much older, and this was confirmed by the developers that time has passed. This is all significant because currently in State of Decay 2, zombies do run at you and chase you down, because though time has passed, they are now slow, it looks like, which means the bigger threats are likely going to be the freaks by far more than anything else. And not just freaks, but potentially plague hearts and evolved plague dangers. Now as I mentioned earlier, in the trailer in the beginning there's this forest shot, right? And you see this red smoke in the background, potentially indicating plague hearts, which are very present currently in State of Decay 2, and obviously they're the biggest threat that we face right now, and it's very prevalent. This is going to continue on in the next game, it looks like. Also in the first trailer, there was a big showcase on zombie deer and maybe even a wolf that maybe could turn into a zombie down the line as well. Is that still at play as well? We'll have to wait and see. With that, before I get into the rest of the video, do you guys ever feel like the internet is overrun by ridiculous ads and data-hungry corporations, almost like digital zombies in a way? Well, today's sponsor is The Solution and your ultimate safe house in Pi.org, which is completely free, and it's almost like this, bear with me, like how you scavenge for resources in State of Decay. Pi does the exact same thing by doing something completely unique on top of blocking ads, which you can see disappear in real time, but also get this, when you're online shopping, Pi automatically applies coupons and helps you gather cash back. Most shopping extensions don't work with regular ad blocker. Now imagine every time you looted a building like in State of Decay, you not only found supplies, but you also earn cash back. That's Pi.org in a nutshell. Now as you seriously build your community's defenses, whether it's in real life or in State of Decay, Pi does the same by fortifying your online privacy by letting you block annoying lame ads. Or here's the twist guys, like sometimes maybe in State of Decay you negotiate with an enclave, Pi lets you opt in to earn rewards by seeing certain ads and actually getting paid just by browsing the internet like you normally do. It's like trading with friendly survivors, but only with your wallet. So while you're busy surviving in State of Decay 2 or in life, head over to pi.org/sunnygames or click that link below, add pi.org to your browser extension and start your online survival journey from ads today. Okay, with that, I have to talk about the second biggest thing that people may not know that was continuously talked about not only this past summer with the new trailer, but over the years that I've uncovered about State of Decay 3, and that's talks from the developers themselves, and that is how your community story and your individual stories are going to play a major role in this game. Now, if you're new to the State of Decay franchise, story elements have always been present throughout the first and second game, and they've really helped you understand and us understand the world a lot better, but there is a lot of mystery too. But the game ultimately really leans towards a sandbox in how you interact with the world, and your individual stories get told by how you shape your own events. Now, for example, in State of Decay 2's Heartland DLC or in the Trumbull Valley update, there are full-blown stories that you follow. Now, we don't know presently if we'll get more of these elaborate narratives, but what we do know is that Undead Labs themselves have pointed this past summer that they want their narrative systems to be there to help support the biggest actions, like losing a community member, and they want to do a better job at showing that sacrifice in a meaningful and impactful way to the community. Now, if you guys are unaware, State of Decay's franchise since the first game has always had permadeath. If one of your characters dies, it's gone forever. But for example, in the second game, if a character dies, basically nobody cares, and it isn't really felt throughout your community outside of like a little moral debuff, and people will kind of be sad, but it doesn't last for more than a day, and again, it has no real impact. But the interesting part about this, guys, if you guys have been following this channel over the years, you know that I've uncovered back in 2021 a relationship system being formed by Undead Labs through job postings. There was even this other job, a narrative director. They were looking for someone with experience on establishing character stories, structures, and storytelling systems to convey the game's narrative. So then you go ahead now and you fast forward, and I saw the exact same word verbiage from the developers themselves this past summer. They go on to say, and I quote, "I think it's important for not just the players to remember, but the characters in the world as well. So your narrative systems are really going to be there to help support the biggest ones, because nothing is bigger than losing a community member, especially if there's someone you invested a lot of time and energy to. I think we need to do a better job at showing that sacrifice in a meaningful way and how it might impact the community." And so remember, guys, all that stuff that I uncovered all those years ago, I think is set to be true in a big way, meaning that when someone dies in your community, it will truly affect and make an impact. And I imagine, and I always reference this in other videos, that there's a game out there called This War of Mine. This is another survival title where when someone dies in your game, your little base, your little community will not only be really depressed, but they might never recover from that loss, and you might lose the entire game. And I know that's really harsh, but that's the type of stuff I personally like to see, because I kind of feel it's a little realistic. Now, another aspect of a relationship system that I hope to really see comes in the form of a potential romantic type relationships that you can have, because I think that just makes a lot of sense. I imagine people still want to find love even in these very dark times, but overall, from the horse's mouth and what I found over the years, it does seem like there will be an emphasis on how characters will engage with each other. And guys, I am really excited to see how it all plays out. Now, guys, another thing that we know that's happening in State of Decay 3 is the game will be different in how you interact with the world. Currently in State of Decay 2, you can pretty much loot everything that you need. Now, the time that's passed from State of Decay 1 to State of Decay 2 is about 18 months. And that's between the two games, and that's very important information, because apparently the time that's passed from State of Decay 2 to now 3 is apparently several years later. This was confirmed by the developers themselves, which now means that even though the freaks are much more evolved and more dangerous, so are the characters. They have learned how to adapt. So what that means is, well, basically it means two things. Looting whole guns or whole gear or even intact food is going to be a lot more rare. Maybe it won't even exist. We're not sure yet, but I'm assuming it's going to be more rare because everything has been picked over. And you can see this in the trailer with the gas station as an example. With State of Decay 2, you can see full Bronto gas stations look perfectly normal, but in 3, you can literally see it's completely and utterly decayed. Now, guys, you can believe that looting is still going to be a full focus in this game, but according to the developers, and I quote, quote, "Survivors have come quite adept at surviving several years into the apocalypse. This has turned into a resourceful era where clothing, supplies, and weapons have been modified to accommodate their needs. Expect weapons to have mismatched barrels with heavily modified magazines or clothing reinforced with armor plates. They have leveled up in this maker culture because State of Decay 3 has been picked over by now, and finding components to modify existing weapons will be more likely than looting a whole gun." So guys, crafting will be much more prevalent in State of Decay 3, which is huge, and I am a massive fan of that. Expect to craft your own armor plated clothing, which is something we have never had really, so this is going to be something really cool. And expect to craft makeshift melee weapons, makeshift guns. Also in the trailer we did see modified guns, but we also saw a heavily modified car, and I honestly hope that modified cars will almost be like this physical object that levels alongside your community. Imagine building it up over time with things that you find in the world, and it gets stronger and more badass as your community gets leveled up as well. And I do expect, guys, cars and gas to be even more rare, or at least made in like a new creative ways or something. Now, piggybacking off what's going to be this new crafting to follow is the fact that apparently, guys, combat is said to be more realistic and feature environmental kills, and you'll see that, you actually see that in the trailer as well, even to the point where they want to make, according to the developers, heavily emphasizing engaging co-op combat when smashing and shooting zombies together, and they want to deepen the combat systems, the enemy behaviors, and the animation fidelity. Not only that, make the combat more reactive than before, and even dismemberment will be more visceral and more realistic. So combat, guys, is really said to be overhauled than previously, and hopefully, according to them, feel and look a lot better, and I'm really excited to see that. And that brings us to the world itself, guys. One thing that I didn't catch this past summer was the developers actually go on to say that State of Decay 3 will feature a much larger, truly shared open world. And near the start of the trailer, we do see a pretty big forest, but what really struck me that I actually did miss is that they say it themselves, it's going to feature a bigger world. The current State of Decay maps, I kind of feel like, are pretty big, so I was really happy to hear that. But one thing that's always been missing from this game, though, I have to say, despite the fact that the world's going to be bigger, is weather. Weather's always been missing. Now, the first trailer, it did feature snow, and we did get some hints of rain in the second trailer, and this is a very small hint. We saw puddles of water littered throughout, indicating that it rained at some point. There was even, I think, fog here in that opening part of the trailer. There was some fog, so I do fully expect to see some more weather and just more dynamic environments in general in the next game. Guys, if you haven't already, throw me a thumbs up if you're really enjoying this video. I did put a lot of time and research on this, and a big thumbs up goes a long way if you guys really appreciate it. Also, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and leave a comment down below at some point, because the developers do read the comments. They actually take feedback from these videos, so make sure you guys let your voice be heard, because that's a big deal. With that, let's pivot to basically what I feel is the first elephant in the room. Since we're talking about weather and things that have been missing, let's talk about the actual fact that there wasn't really any gameplay. We actually saw very little actual gameplay in the second trailer. It does exist though. There's about 3 parts where they last only about a second or two, but you can clearly get an idea of some of the gameplay. Not only that, at the very start of the trailer, it does mention the trailer itself is in-game footage. Now, the devs themselves clarified this point a little further and go on to say the trailer is a true reflection of what we'll play too. It's all in-game assets, all rendered from the game, and it's a depiction of a typical scene that you would encounter in a 4-player co-op session. Now, there is precedent for this. If you actually go back to the original State of Decay 2 trailer, they did the same thing where it was more cinematic, technically, but you can clearly see in-game footage and it pretty much matches. So what you will see is what you'll be getting as far as how the game looks. And I actually think the game looks gorgeous, considering YouTube compresses the crap out of this and makes it look a lot uglier. And I do think it will be one of the best looking post-apocalyptic games we've seen, especially this generation. And they aren't doing it alone, guys. They've actually teamed up with the Coalition, the makers of Gears of War franchise, to help them with Unreal Engine 5 and make the game look great. And I gotta say, it really did look good to me. And speaking of help that Undead Labs has received, multiplayer, guys, is set to be a huge focus in State of Decay 3, as Undead Labs also has worked alongside Obsidian Entertainment on the shared world feature that they have in Grounded, enabling more flexible online co-op using Grounded's shared save technology, and State of Decay 3 is planning to build on that, guys, which I have to say gets me really excited. And guys, this is huge because this means that you can start a new world yourself with your friends at any point. They can join in and contribute to that world even when you're not online, and it will save the world. So hopefully, though, you don't actually come back to see like everyone dead, but that is pretty huge and a huge step up from the current system where you join in with someone and they can't really interact or build with certain things within your space. Not only that, one of the things that the developers this past summer wanted to really highlight is how in the trailer all the characters are in different spots, and this is meaning that you won't be seeing a strict tether like you have in like State of Decay 2. So when you're playing with your friends, they can be completely separated, which is why you see in the trailer that one lady had to call for help from her buddies who were not nearby. So there will be this like unrestricted, persistent, and much more fluid multiplayer than we have ever seen in the State of Decay franchise, where you can all build and survive or maybe die all together, and I just gotta say, I really love it. Now, one of the final things I feel I can safely mention that is somewhat confirmed, you can see it at the end of the trailer. You see this memorial wall, and I feel like I can fully expect something like this existing if any of your community dies. The reason I expect it is the way kind of like the developers talked throughout the interview and how important it was for you to feel these impacts when someone dies, and then you focus on the trinkets like the one that got picked up from the person who died. More than likely we'll be seeing that type of thing with all the characters, and I think it's a great touch and something that I'm really looking forward to seeing. Though I am hoping, and you can go ahead and take me to the bank on this, I'm hoping that no one will die in any of my community playthroughs that you guys will get to see. But either way, I'm really excited for that, and I'm glad to see that they're implementing something like this so you can really feel the touch and the death and everything that goes along with it. And now that brings us to things that aren't confirmed but are pretty backed up by other sources, and this one's really important to me. That's the very first trailer that dropped in July of 2020, and I have usually referenced this trailer to things we'll see confirmed, whether that's the weather itself, new zombie threats in the form of deer, maybe even camping in the woods, but there was nothing that brought together the second trailer with the first. What's weird about this, guys, is actually it's been on record from the developers themselves that they actually had no plan when this trailer came out, as in the first one. The big scandal Kotaku article that dropped in 2022, if you look at this specific paragraph, a developer says, "We didn't want to announce the game because we didn't know what it was at that point. A zombie deer in the teaser became a focal point, and that it caught developers by surprise." And I gotta say, what caught me by surprise is that there was no indication that that first trailer again existed in the second one. Did they scrap everything from the first trailer? Well, one thing I hope they didn't was wildlife in some form. If everything is picked over and you might not be able to potentially loot food like we can in current games, that would actually be huge to be able to hunt and use that for crafting. And guys, I actually have evidence the past few years that they have hired for people for this specific job. Just earlier this year, I found a job listing for a character art lead where they were looking for someone with wildlife experience. So I do think hunting might be around, but zombie deer, I'm not so sure, but I guess we'll wait and see. And that brings us to the very last elephant in the room, the thing that I kind of do obsess over the most, and that's a release date. And there is so much to get into with this piece, but let's actually start here with the facts first. Back in summer of 2023, Matt Booty, head of Xbox Game Studios, had this to say regarding Undead Labs, and I am paraphrasing here. He says, "Looking ahead to the next 18 months in terms of what we're going to be able to show and deliver, the kind of gameplay reveal, I'm confident because the teams are hard at work, and let's show up with gameplay and do a deeper dive when we show up." Now, I've personally been on record even in my past videos, and if you look at his timeline, that kind of would indicate a 2025 release date. I actually predicted that the trailer this past showcase would come out, and I was correct based on Matt's timeline. That would also mean 18 months from now, when he said this quote, we would see the gameplay, the next developer direct, we would see full gameplay showcase, and then indicating from there, when you see see the gameplay drop from this showcase, that would mean that the game's releasing this upcoming year. So far, we haven't heard anything, and it has been crickets. And going even further, on a podcast called The Xbox 2, Jez Corden from Windows Central let it out that the target window to release date for State of Decay 3 is 2025. And he's connected because he also broke the news, the info early, that we were absolutely going to see a State of Decay 3 trailer this past summer, and he nailed that. So in theory, guys, we should see this game in 2025, but I'm kind of here to tell you that if we don't see big gameplay here at the next month's developer direct, I'm going to be very skeptical that we won't be seeing this game pushed until 2026. And further fueling this thought of mine that we might not see this until 2026, recently this guy here, Jeff Grubb from Giant Bomb, he tends to break things as well. Some days ago, he went on to say that one of Xbox's games has slipped until 2026, and he's been assuming that it could be Perfect Dark, but nobody was hearing about Perfect Dark coming in 2025. But the rumblings and the timelines, we've been hearing that State of Decay 3 should be coming out in 2025. And if I had to guess, guys, and I had to put my own money on this, I would actually bet that the game that is being slipped until 2026 is probably State of Decay 3. I'm hoping I'm wrong. I would love to see a release date in 2025, and I guess we'll just find out soon either way. But guys, I'm in the camp of just let them cook, because as early as 2021, according to that Kotaku article, they didn't even have a coherent slice of game to show to Microsoft. This was in just a couple years ago. That wasn't long ago. And as far as back as 2022, I think I was telling you on this channel that they were in pre-production. This was coming from direct quotes from the developers themselves, where I have it on record on video footage where I would tell you guys. All this to say, really, in the end, is do not be shocked that we will not see this game until 2026. But of course, my hope is that we could see it this upcoming year. And finally, guys, let's mention the very last update from Undead Labs themselves. On September 4th, they announced that they were winding down updates for State of Decay 2, which we have now gotten these final updates. And they go on to say that they are shifting their resources to make the upcoming third installment, which is State of Decay 3. And at the very bottom of this webpage in an FAQ, they have it to where the question is, when is it coming out? And they go on to say that they'll share that release date at a later time. Now, what's interesting about this is the shifting of the resources. Now, the only real resource they had working on State of Decay 2 for almost a year, or I think even over a year, is an independent studio called Wushu Studios. This has been confirmed via their live streams multiple times. So this tells me that they are probably putting Wushu and all the other teams hard at work on State of Decay 3. And I have to say, I'm excited to see that. Now, when I actually got to personally talk to Undead Labs in Seattle this past summer, there's one thing that really resonated with me. This team is extremely passionate, guys. I was actually really surprised. They're very dedicated to making the best game they can. And over the years, I feel like they've really proven that they are willing to listen to us on our feedback, us the fans. So I am really expecting, as I said at the start of this video, maybe the craziest and the coolest post-apocalyptic game we have ever seen. And honestly, at the end of the day, I think you should as well.